Today, I'm going to talk about why and how politicians are able to maintain such a tight grip on the police. Why does it often look like the police is acting at the behest of the government? Now, at one level, it may seem pretty obvious. The police reports to typically in states to the home minister and in union territories to the lieutenant governor. So naturally, if their boss is some politician, then the government should be able to maintain control. But then there's a question here, big question, which is that after all, not just in police, but in any government organization, we give people lifelong security. So you have job security from the time you join to the time you retire. You know exactly how many years do you have to serve. Promotions are sort of time bound, almost guaranteed. So normally this one would say that, okay, in these circumstances, people should feel fairly independent to do the right thing. In fact, job security has got lots and lots of many other negative consequences, but the one positive thing is that it should give you independence. But we are not even seeing that in many departments. In fact, I would say across the government, including in the police force. So why is that? Why is that happening? So today I'm going to analyze that and break it down step by step and hopefully bring out some insights for you. All right. So now let's get started. So I talked about job security, right? What does it mean? It means that you know that you are going to have a job tomorrow or next month or next year, come what may. Come what may, as in, of course, there'll be some extreme events. You should not commit a big blunder or commit a crime, but otherwise nobody can fire you because they don't like you. All right. Now, here's the deal. At a high level, that is true. But in the police department, like many government organizations, but it's more so in police, you find that at any level, let's take the level of IPS as an example. At the level of superintendent of police, there are some positions, as an example, the district police chief, which is considered to be very substantive, very powerful. You have a very, very meaningful role. But for every position as a district police chief, in the state police administration, there are probably 3, 4, 5, maybe even more such posts where the responsibility is significantly diluted. If you go higher up, you'll find this even more so. At the level of DIG or IG, you'll find there are a couple of posts which are very, very substantive, and there are many others where in some cases you'll actually find people may not even have even half an hour of work every day. And these positions are not the exception. At higher levels, there are lots and lots of these kind of positions. So what it does is it gives the political establishment a very simple but a very powerful tool. If I can put a person in position A where he has a massive responsibility and position B where he has nothing, think about it. Nobody wants to feel redundant. Nobody wants to just waste their life. People want to have some sense of responsibility. They want to feel like they are able to do something. The job has to have a meaning. It can go to an extreme where you could be running the law and order of a state or maybe half a state or maybe like 3 or 4 districts. And the government with one signature on a piece of paper, they can take that person and put him in a place where he or she will be probably not even like running a very small company or maybe some public sector unit or even something even worse. So this proliferation of a lot of posts which are notionally equal, but in practice they are very, very different in their responsibility and authority. That is the single biggest thing that politicians have. So now, if some politician or some government, if they like a person, they can put him in good positions where they feel very powerful and important and they have a meaningful role, or they can dump him somewhere and people can sometimes stagnate and rot in those positions for years and years and decades sometimes. I have seen excellent officers, people with impeccable credentials, high integrity, stuck in a post where for 5 years they had nothing to do. And sometimes the stress levels can be so high that people might even get health problems, stress, lots of those issues. All right. So this is one big problem, which is notionally all posts are equal, but in practice they are not. And therefore everybody craves for, or not everybody, but a lot of people, they try to get into, or they want to get into, they may not try, but they would be happy to get into these powerful positions. And now the governments or anybody can say that, look, you can get that post, but then you have to You have to play the game that I want. I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not saying every government does that. Don't get me wrong. That's not the point. But there is a possibility. And in many cases, it does happen. All right. So this is one big thing which essentially takes a lot of the meat out of job security. All right. Number two, the second problem is that policing is a very dangerous job. And when it's a dangerous, I'm not just talking about the physical danger. That, of course, is there. But more than the physical danger, I would say, is just a danger to your career. So as an example, just a simple example, let's say you are heading a district police, or maybe you're a sub-inspector or circle inspector, any rank, doesn't matter. Now it so happened that you were facing a crowd. The crowd was violent and you did a lathi charge and some people got injured. Normally these things will go usually without too much of a problem. There'll be an FIR, there'll be an investigation, and it'll take its due course. But sometimes the government may order an inquiry. Sometimes if it's a big incident and somebody dies or there is some massive consequence, there could even be a judicial inquiry. Now, think about it. When there is any such problem, or let's say the matter goes to High Court, there is some contempt or any such problem, as a police officer, to represent you, you need a lawyer. And who will give that lawyer? Very often that lawyer will come from the government. Any court case, it could be a contempt case or anything which goes to the High Court as an example, you are represented only by the government lawyer. If the government doesn't like you, think about it, the lawyer belongs to the government. They don't like you, you are in trouble. You can't even go to the High Court and say, I'll speak for myself. No, you'll be represented by the lawyers who are appointed by the government. So your defense is controlled by the government. One more, further pushing the point. Let's say you did a lathi charge and there was some, let's say there was massive violence and you took some action. Now, if there is an inquiry, you have to prove that there was massive violence by the crowd. How will you prove it? Where will the proof come from? The evidence will come from the case investigation. If the government says, okay, after the incident, let's say some person is assigned to do the investigation, who doesn't do it properly, who doesn't care, evidence is not collected. And when the inquiry comes, how will you show there was violence? Because that happened 1 year back, 2 years ago. You can't show it. Once again, your life, your security, your well-being sometimes very implicitly depends upon the government or the political establishment. All right. Now let's talk about punishments. Now you might say, okay, but punishment is only for bad people. Yes, theoretically true. But I have seen very, very honest officers. In fact, I will not share the names, but I know of a couple of people, one person in particular who was extremely honest, very straightforward, extremely hardworking. I would say sort of the role model kind of officer. And that person, he was suspended multiple times in his career. In fact, jokingly, his friends used to say he was suspended in every rank. As a sub-inspector, he was suspended. As an inspector, he was suspended. And then after that, again, he was suspended once. And mind you, this guy was really, really honest, very straightforward. But same thing. You do stuff, sometimes things go wrong, you don't control everything. Life takes its toll. And if the governments don't like you, they can take that opportunity and punish you. Once again, I'm not saying governments always do that. In fact, I have seen some excellent governments. Right? So it's not like everyone does it, but this is definitely a possibility. Finally, remember one thing. As a professional, you just come and go from one post to another. But the politicians, they have a very strong hold. They are present. They are physically present throughout the state, in different districts. So the political establishment is much deeper and it is very, very strong in many states. All right. Now, there is one more thing beyond that, which is in police especially, as you know, it's a very hierarchical organization. So as an example, at the top of the DGP, then there'll be additional DGPs, then IGs, DIGs, Superintendent of Police, and then there'll be DYSPs. This is one department where if the boss says something, the juniors, 99.9% of the time, they will just say, yes, sir. In fact, this culture of authoritarianism and hierarchy, it is built right from the training. Now, I'm not saying it's always a bad thing. It's got some positives as well as some negatives. The positives are if you want to execute a police action, you want to do a lathi charge, you want to control your team well. So this kind of hierarchy does help, but it comes at a cost, especially at the leadership level. If your mindset is such that the only thing you are trained to say is yes, sir, every single day, when you are given an incorrect order, will you be able to stand up and say, no, I'll not do it? You can, but it becomes very, very hard because you are mentally not attuned to it. In fact, I have, again, without giving a specific exam, without sharing the exact details, I can share one example where there was some incident many, many years back, and mass arrests were made. And it was the action, this was not in my state, it was in some other state. I was talking to a friend of mine. And then I asked him, like, all these arrests that were made at large scale, was it necessary? Then he said, look, the order came from top. How do you say no? Because if you say no and then something happens, the blame will come on you. So this hierarchy and this imposition of this authoritarian power of the organization, it takes away the independence of a person. So even if let's say in the middle some officer does not want to compromise, if the order is coming from the top, it is very, very hard to say no. And if you say no, then essentially you are the enemy of the establishment itself. And then tomorrow if you are in trouble, nobody will stand up for you. All these things, they add up to make it very, very difficult for people to stand up. Now, I'm not saying people don't do that. Despite that, many officers I know have stood up. But there are many numerically, but percentage-wise, it is very, very small. I have till now talked only about the genuine, legitimate reasons, or at least the reasons which are relevant for honest people. I have not even talked about corruption. If somebody is corrupt, then all these are not even required. Then for them, even if none of those existed, they will play with the politicians. Why? Because if they are corrupt, first of all, they want to be in those positions where they can be corrupt. Second, they want protection if something goes wrong. None of those things will come unless you join hands with the political power. So for all these reasons, not just for corrupt people, but even for honest people, it sometimes is hard. Now, it doesn't mean it's a reason not to stand up. My belief is that if you put on the uniform, you have sworn, you have taken an oath by the Constitution. Whether it is easy or whether it is hard, it is an obligation, especially for leadership. The reason we give so much importance to leadership and give them this exalted position is for them to take those difficult decisions. I'm not saying these things are not easy, but leaders are not given that power for easy things. They're given for hard things. So this is not an excuse, but this is why it happens. In fact, you might ask a question, okay, but if these reasons did not exist, if things were different, would police behave differently? My guess is yes. In fact, let's take example of Indian judiciary. Now, my personal experience has been that Indian judiciary, by far, from the lowest level magistrates court to the Supreme Court, by far, it is honest, objective, and I would say politically, it doesn't get influenced by politicians. Now, of course, if you look at the history of the country, you'll find some aberrations here or there. But I would say for the most part, they have done their job impeccably. What's the reason? The reason is that the judiciary does not come under the control of the political authority. The posting of the junior most judges to the senior most judge selection, the government may have some role on the margin, but it is controlled by the high courts and Supreme Court. Their transfers, posting, selection, training, a lot of those things, including their housing and many other conditions, they are controlled by the judiciary themselves, by the judges themselves to a great extent. And that is why our judiciary is a lot more independent than the police. Now but there's one thing to remember, which is that if a crime happens, the investigation is done by the police, the trial happens by the court. But investigation is the starting point. That is the main thing. If the investigation is it's done badly, then no trial will be able to give justice. And I strongly feel that if we want justice, our policing system, the investigation of cases and even the maintenance of law and order to a great extent, it has to be, if not independent, there has to be a semblance of objectivity. There's one thing to keep in mind, which is that all government departments, they work under some political boss or some political leader. Nothing wrong with it. But the difference between, let's say, a police department versus a PWD or some other department is that in other departments, in PWD as an example, the government can decide, do they want to build this road or not? It's a free decision. Whereas in policing, the job of police is precisely and concretely laid down by our laws. So CRPC, IPC, they tell exactly what can be done and what cannot be done. There is no discretion in a real sense. There is discretion, but that discretion has to be used for public interest. So you are doing something which is precisely defined. It is not discretionary in a real sense. And therefore, these functions, they have to be executed that way. It is not happening today. And the reasons are what I described to you. So I hope this was useful, and I'm hoping that gradually this kind of understanding, when it percolates over time, it will lead to some gentle pressure and some public support for changes in the way things work in this country. I hope you liked this video. And if you did, I'll ask you to subscribe to this channel. And I hope to see you soon in the next video. Thank you very much.